all of your hope. We get out of here, you in the shower sing.
This is Dystopia Now, a show where a comedian and an academic explore the philosophies and religions of Silicon Valley and the tech billionaires shaping our country, our world, and our future. I'm Kate Willett, and my co-host is Emil Torres.
That's when it suddenly hit me. Let's let the filthy billionaires all leave for Mars, 'cause we don't want them here. They steal what we...
Hello and welcome back to Dystopia Now. I'm Kate Willett.
I'm Emil P. Torres.
And today we are going to talk about Peter Thiel. But first, we just wanted to say that, yeah, we are living in a dystopia now. That is definitely really happening.
Yep, sad but true.
After we recorded last week, a Palestinian graduate student, Mahmoud Khalil, was taken into custody by ICE. I'm sure this is not news to anyone listening to this podcast at this point, but it hadn't happened yet when we recorded last time. And the video has come out, and he's being taken by plainclothes police officers. They won't tell him what agency is taking him to custody. They won't tell his wife where he's going. Yesterday, there was another piece of news that came out. ICE has pursued a Fulbright scholar, and she's now had to flee the country because she liked pro-Palestinian posts and signed a letter calling for Palestinian liberation. One connection this has with the things that we've been talking about on this show, it's looking like ICE or other government agencies are actually monitoring social media now, especially for non-citizens. And, you know, these platforms that are in the hands of these right-wing billionaires, they are potentially being used to, you know, target and surveil people who have expressed views that they do not like.
So this is just, it's a really frightening moment. And again, it sort of underlines the extreme dangerousness of these technologies being utilized by individuals who have autocratic or authoritarian tendencies. Frightening.
And Peter Thiel, who we're talking about today, his company, Palantir, has had contracts with ICE in the past as well. And I think Peter Thiel is kind of right at the forefront of that particular creepiness. So to start off with Peter Thiel, I know a lot of you probably have heard of Peter Thiel, and I doubt that it's news for anyone listening to this show, that Peter Thiel is kind of a right-wing scumbag, that he's a venture capitalist, that he supports Donald Trump. You probably have even heard at some point of, you know, this kind of weird monarchy, post-democracy stuff that he's into. You know, we'll talk about that, but we also want to try to, if we can, get into some things that you may not have heard before about Peter Thiel.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah, so Emil, who is Peter Thiel? Who's this guy? A gay Republican? What? Why?
Yeah, he's a bit of an enigma. He's a contrarian. He likes to disagree with people. He likes to hold these sort of aberrant, anomalous views that aren't particularly popular. He enjoys that. So he was born in Germany, and then he lived in South Africa for a little while, as well as Southwest Africa, in, I think, modern-day Namibia. And so then he ended up in the U.S., an immigrant like Elon Musk, although I don't think Thiel was an illegal immigrant like Musk was.
I mean, I'm just thinking, look, I'm not trying to stereotype too much, but like Germany, white South African, then the US, this guy is like really on a racism world tour.
Yeah.
He's hitting some of the biggest Nazi locations in the world. He's trying to diversify his portfolio with like where you could just find some of the most racist white people on the planet.
Yeah. And then, he's here in the U.S. supporting Trump, contributing to the escalation of racial tensions in the U.S. So, yeah, I mean, he sort of made his fortune through PayPal, where he was one of the co-founders of PayPal back in 98 or 1997. And then he ultimately sold PayPal for more than $1 billion to eBay.
Before he had this like edgelord publication, I think it was called the Stanford Review. And this is where he met some of the people that he ended up working with later on, hiring at PayPal. And this was just like, it was like the 1980s version of what's happening now, basically. Like, the wokes are ruining everything. Like, why should we have to let women advance? Like, a bunch of racist stuff. And it seems like he has kind of like, he made some friends there and then sort of carried this forward with him to the rest of his career.
Yeah, it's really funny thinking about the terminological evolution of the very same sorts of complaints about the, targeting the left from the right. So political correctness was, the term that people used for a long time. I remember, 10 years ago or so, it was regressive leftism. That's what everyone was talking about. And then neo-Marxist postmodernism, was a term that caught on for a little while, sort of oxymoronic.
Cultural Marxism, that was one.
Yeah.
James Lindsay was really big on that. You know who James Lindsay is?
Yeah, so back in the day, I knew James Lindsay.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, yeah.
Okay, so for listeners who have not heard James Lindsay was one of the main, and I say was because I haven't really, he seems to have faded from the public eye in some
That's my
way,
impression
but
too.
Yeah, he was one of the main people that was behind this CRT panic. And, it was funny because he would talk about Marxism, but the people that he would always cite as these like Marxists would be like Robin DiAngelo or something, like people who are decidedly not Marxist in any way. If anything, people who are probably pretty antagonistic to leftist ideas. He just seems so upset all the time about, and Christopher Rufo as well, who seems to have more lasting power, but they seem to be like two of the main really upset guys that kind of set a lot of this off.
I totally agree. So not that long ago, I mean, this was probably 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more. James Lindsay co-authored a book with a woman named Helen Pluckrose called Cynical Theories. It was a book that was deeply flawed. So James Lindsay has a PhD in mathematics.
Okay.
He has no background in like critical theory or philosophy and so on. And a lot of the stuff he says about Marxism and similar topics is just wildly inaccurate, just completely naive. And in fact, after Cynical Theories came out, I wrote some of the authors that they cite, that they criticize in the book, and just said, hey, so this is the account of your work that James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose provide. Is it accurate? And every single, I think I wrote probably 7 people, every single one said no, not at all. But I was going to mention Christopher Rufo as well, because I think James Lindsay and Christopher Rufo really were, in some important way, responsible for the moral panic over critical race theory, which then has sort of morphed into talk of DEI. Right,
Yeah.
right. So that's the term that everybody, wokeism as well. DEI and wokeism. Those are the two terms these days. Who knows what the next cycle of new terms will bring.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is just, and I mean, at the heart of it's like being upset about, desegregation at the end of slavery, to be honest, for a lot of these super right-wing people. Like, they are just really bad that they have to live in an integrated society, which is something that the right has been figuring out how to talk about since the civil rights movement, without saying specifically, hey, we don't think that Black people should have rights. So instead, at this point, they're like, oh yeah, well, the plane crashed. Well, it's probably because there was a DEI pilot,
I mean, a bunch of people on Twitter, I think, have rightly noted that the term DEI oftentimes in the sorts of comments that you had just referenced, about plane crashes and so on, DEI means Black.
Yes.
Right? And so, like, I even saw just recently.
I mean, in the way that they're using it. Like,
exactly.
in real life,
Yes.
It means diversity, equity, and inclusion. And oftentimes, like, corporate programs that I wouldn't even say have much to do with what the left wants in most cases. It's like, corporate HR, diversity type initiatives. I'm not against them. I'm sure some have been good, but we're not talking about, Marxist wealth redistribution here, or like fundamentally
right.
changing the balance of power in a society. We're talking about like making sure that job postings are widely shared to attract the most diverse talent possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the funny thing is DEI programs at universities, the biggest beneficiary is white women.
Yeah.
Right. Because they help to deal
and rural
with
people too, rural whites as well.
Yeah. So I mean, if there's like instance of sexual misconduct at a university, I'll say that again. So if there's an incident of sexual misconduct at a university, it's the quote unquote DEI office that will take care of that. So I even saw the other day somebody complaining about Bill Burr, him sort of criticizing Elon Musk and Trump, and the MAGA individual who was trying to, take down Bill Burr.
The MAGA individual does also sound like it would be the title of like one of the worst self-help books of all time, to be honest. Wake up, 7 a.m., troll women on the internet, 8 a.m., complain about how Black people have taken a job that you did not have in the first place. Like the MAGA individual. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Through saved on your computer, your library of memes.
Yeah.
So they're fresh in your mind. You go out and you engage in this meme warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah, but someone was
12 p.m. complain about housing. Are you mad at landlords? No. Are you mad at developers? No. Are you mad at immigrants who are unsheltered? Yes.
Someone basically said, "Oh, his DEI wife must have gotten to him," and so he's married to a Black woman. That's just in unequivocal example of how that the term DEI can indicate that a lot of these people are just flat out racist.
Yes, absolutely.
We haven't even gotten to Peter Thiel yet.
Yes. Okay. Let's get back to Peter Thiel because this guy, I'm not a big fan, I would say.
I have mixed feelings.
You support his traditional views on gender, believe that women should be in the home, that men should be men.
No, it's just that I like Palantir.
Okay, so we're talking around a lot of things. So let's give just like a little timeline. So basically, Peter Thiel, he goes to Stanford in the 1980s. Then he he goes to Stanford Law School. Then he clerks for a judge for the U.S. Appeals Court. Then he becomes a corporate lawyer, working as a securities lawyer, and then returns to the Bay Area to capitalize on the dot-com boom as a venture capitalist and starts a company called Thiel Capital Management with some friends he knows from Stanford. Mm-hmm. And at this point, we're like in the late 90s.
Yeah. And it was 98 when
98, okay.
Yeah, co-founded PayPal, which is supposed to be this sort of libertarian alternative to government-issued currency.
Yes, and we've talked about on the PayPal Mafia. We've talked about the PayPal Mafia, particularly on our episode on the tech right with Jacob Silverman in this group of men, and I'm saying men not because I'm erasing women, because it was literally men, white men. David Sachs is in there. Elon Musk is in there. There's Reid Hoffman, who is a big Democratic donor who also agrees with these people on a lot of things, but feels like he can get it done through the Democratic Party. He's in there. So this PayPal Mafia, that is like probably in some ways like traceable to like the birth of our current terrible moment is in that PayPal Mafia.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the platform that launched Musk, Thiel. Like you said, Reid Hoffman, he's a more likable, a more empathetic individual, it seems, than he doesn't have the same kind of far-right views that Thiel and a lot of the others, Musk. A lot of these people had sort of far-right views. And PayPal never really ended up fulfilling its dream of providing this alternative currency, but it still ended up being super useful.
Yeah.
So they did sell it to eBay for, I think it was 1.5 billion. And so, that gave Musk and the others quite a bit of money to pursue their other entrepreneurial adventures and misadventures.
So now we're in the early 2000s, and after PayPal, a little after PayPal, Thiel starts Palantir. And as we talked about with Albert Foxconn, that is named after Lord of the Rings, after an all-seeing eye, because Peter Thiel loves to name everything after Lord of the Rings stuff. That's the most hate we ever got online for one of our clips, is the people thought we were making fun of Lord of the Rings. People were so angry about that. Look, no, I'm not making fun of Lord of the Rings. I'm making fun of the fact that Peter Thiel likes it. And my assessment of who Peter Thiel is politically at this point is very much still kind of in the like Ayn Rand type libertarian sphere. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah.
So, in this decade, around 2008, Peter Thiel gives a bunch of money to the Seasteading Institute. And the Seasteading Institute, is kind of to me, it seems like it's sort of like the birth of like this, hey, like, let's get out of here and start a libertarian colony. And they want to do it on the open sea. And he gives all this money to Milton Friedman's grandson, named Patry Friedman, to figure out how to homestead the open sea. And they throw this like big party called Ephemeral. I accidentally went to the first Ephemeral. I think I've told you, because it was like, I just thought it was like, an outdoor party on the water, but it ended up just being all these fucking weirdo crypto libertarians.
That's so strange.
And so can I just read you something that Peter Thiel wrote around this time about his own politics? It's not too long. This is for the Cato Unbound. I remain committed to the faith of my teenage years, to authentic human freedom as a precondition for the highest good. I stand against confiscatory taxes, totalitarian collectives, and ideology about the inevitability of death of every individual. We'll come back to that mortality skepticism. For all these reasons, I still call myself a libertarian. But I must confess that over the last 2 decades, I have changed radically on the question of how to achieve these goals. Most importantly, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. By tracing out the development of my thinking, I hope to frame some of the challenges faced by all classical liberals today. As a Stanford undergraduate in the late 1980s, I naturally was drawn to the give and take of debate and the desire to bring about freedom through political means. I started a student newspaper to challenge the prevailing campus orthodoxies. We scored some limited victories, most notably in undoing speech codes instituted by the university. But in a broader sense, we did not achieve all that much for all the effort expended. Much of it felt like trench warfare on the Western Front in World War I. There was a lot of carnage, but we did not move the center of the debate. In hindsight, we were preaching mainly to the choir, even if this had the important benefit of convincing the choir's members to continue singing for the rest of their lives. As a young lawyer and trader in Manhattan, I began to understand why so many became disillusioned after college. The world appears too big of a place. Rather than fight the relentless indifference of the universe, many of my saner peers retreated to tending their small garden. The higher one's IQ, the more pessimistic one became about free market politics. Capitalism is simply not that popular with the crowd. Among the smartest conservatives, this pessimism often manifested in heroic drinking. The smartest libertarians, by contrast, had fewer hang-ups about positive law and escaped not only to alcohol, but beyond it. As one fast forwards to 2009, the prospects for a libertarian politics appear grim indeed. Exhibit A is the financial crisis caused by too much debt and leverage, facilitated by a government that ensured all sorts of moral hazards, as we know that the response to the crisis involved way more debt and leverage and way more government. Those who have argued for free markets have been screaming into a hurricane. The events of recent months shatter any remaining hopes of politically minded libertarians. For those of us who are libertarian in 2009, our education culminates with the knowledge that the broader education of the body politic has become a fool's errand. I'm almost done reading this, but this paragraph we're coming up on is really intense. Even more pessimistically, the trend has been going the wrong way for a long time. To return to finance, the last economic depression in the United States that did not result in massive government intervention was the collapse of 1920 to 21. It was sharp but short and entailed the sort of Schumpeterian creative destruction that could lead to a real boom. The decade that followed, the Roaring Twenties, was so strong that historians have forgot about the depression that started it. The 1920s were the last decade in American history during which one could be genuinely optimistic about politics. Here we go. Here's the real. Since 1920,
I know what's coming.
Yeah. Since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women, two constituencies that are notoriously tough for libertarians, have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. In face of these realities, one would despair if one's limited horizon to the world of politics. I do not despair because I no longer believe that politics encompasses all possible futures in our world. In our time, the great task for libertarians is to find an escape from politics in all forms, from that totalitarian and fundamentalist catastrophes to the unthinking demos that guides so-called social democracy. The critical question becomes one of means, how to escape, not via politics, but beyond it. Okay, and I'll stop reading there, but the things that he gives as ways to live your libertarianism, live your truth as a libertarian. Okay, one is cyberspace. That's pretty obvious how that connects to Peter Thiel and his goals. He says the hope of the internet is that these new worlds will impact and force change in the existing social and political order.
And so his claim here is that politics is just not an effective means
Yes,
for
and
bringing
that's in
about.
2000. That's in 2009 that he says that. So obviously he changed his mind, but I think it's good to set the stage.
Absolutely,
And then so cyberspace, outer space. So humanity can go to, outer space, have libertarian future among the heavens, as you and I have discussed, and also seasteading. He's into seasteading at this point. Like, he's given the money to Patrick Friedman. Between cyberspace and outer space lies the possibility of settling the oceans. To my mind, the question of whether people will live there, answer, enough will, are secondary to the question about whether seasteading technology is imminent. From my vantage point, the technology involved is more tentative than the internet, but much more realistic than space travel. So, he goes into these ideas for libertarian utopias, but, he sees like the current problem as, okay, it's the Obama era. People want government regulation. People want social programs. They want a social safety net, and the bitches want to vote. Why? This is his assessment of the problems at this point, which is, 15, 16 years before our current moment that we're in right now.
Yeah. I think from his perspective, it was the 19th Amendment. So women's suffrage, it passed in 1920.
Yeah.
That was really a turning point in American history.
And the Great Depression as well, the New Deal.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And it's interesting because you mentioned just a moment ago, you alluded to this. Thiel, his views on the ineffectiveness of politics changed in 2016, right, when he came out and he gave this speech at the Republican National Convention in support of Trump.
He did like a little other stuff politically before that. He was a donor to the Romney campaign. Basically, he wasn't trying to like buy politics at this point.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things that we skipped over. In 1995, he wrote The Diversity Myth with David Sachs. David Sachs we'll talk about at length. David Sachs has probably been one of the billionaires that's been most active in trying to change the politics of San Francisco. Thiel goes into views in this book that he got in big trouble for about sexual assault. He had to apologize for two different statements. One is, the purpose of the rape crisis movement seems as much about vilifying men as about raising awareness. But since a multicultural rape charge may indicate nothing more than belated regret, a woman might not realize that she's been raped until the next day or even many days later. And he had to apologize for these statements when he was supporting Trump's campaign, particularly because he made a support of Trump known after the grab him by the pussy stuff. So he's trying to defend himself from the accusations of misogyny, that date rape especially, is regretted sex. And he also wrote this other book about startups called 0 to 1 that I think is how a lot of people in Silicon Valley got into him as a thinker, not just like a dude to give them money, but like this guy, he knows something. He's our little prophet or something.
Yeah. He also, I'm remembering now, had an office in Trump Tower during the presidential transition of 2016. So the interesting thing is that the most recent election, he didn't support Trump. Right. So he actually seemed to, there was an interview with, I think, the New Yorker, where he said that he now sees, I guess, once again, politics as basically a dead end, not an effective way to actually bring about change, the sort of change that he wants to see in the US, and that instead we should be looking at other possibilities. But my impression, at least, is that since Trump was elected, he's done a bit more to like cozy up to Trump once again, because Trump did call him something like a fucking bastard, something like that.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Peter Thiel and Thiel Money clearly has a lot of influence. Trump's 2024 campaign. Like, Peter Thiel has been the biggest backer of J.D. Vance. The reason that J.D. Vance's political career is a thing is because
$15 million that were donated to Vance when he was running for Senate in Ohio back in 20. Yeah.
And at first, I didn't understand why Donald Trump would have picked J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance he's just honestly so fucking annoying that it's hard to see who he's really going to bring into the campaign. He was wildly unpopular. So he gestures to populism in a way that a lot of Republican candidates do not. But, it seems like a pick that wasn't necessarily going to help his campaign in any way. And, if you think about, like, if he picked someone like, Nikki Haley or whatever, he might have been able to bring in more sort of traditional Republicans, or if he picked like a conservative celebrity, then, that might have helped the likability. But like with J.D. Vance, all he really got out of it was like the connection to Thiel and Silicon Valley.
Thiel and Vance go back a long ways. I mean, Thiel hired Vance back in 2017. And then, like I was saying, I mean, he gave $15 million to Vance when he was running for Senate in Ohio. So there's a long history. I think this connection also is important to note, because it's yet another link between the Trump presidency and the ideologies we've been talking about, like transhumanism and long-termism and so on. Vance was had his foot in that puddle, as it were. And just not only is there Musk, running Doge, maybe the second or maybe the first most powerful person in the U.S., but you have J.D. Vance with his deep connections to Peter Thiel, who himself, has really extensive links to the test grill movement. So I'll give just a few examples. In 2013, Peter Thiel gave the keynote address at an Effective Altruist conference. Not just Ineffective Altruist conference, the EA Global conference.
And what is that conference called?
EA Global.
EA Global. Okay.
Yeah. So before that, Peter Thiel founded back in, I want to say this was probably 2009, co-founded with Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's this rationalist, long-termist, singularitarian guy.
And we talked about, I want to remind listeners, we talked about Yudkowsky before. We were talking about AI doomers versus AI accelerationists. Yudkowsky, is that how you say his name? Yudkowsky. Okay, so he's one of the doomers, but as we were discussing, the doom is sort of fake. Nobody is saying that we should stop building AI. It's just like, well, it's probably going to kill us all, but we obviously have to keep going.
Yeah, so I would say he's the most influential AI doomer in the world, and probably the most influential figure within the field going back to the early 2000s. So the most famous book on this topic was written by Nick Bostrom, called Superintelligence, published in 2014. But as one reviewer, himself very much part of the test grill movement, noted, if you scratch the surface of Bostrom, you find Yudkowsky. So he's this massively influential figure. And the other thing to say is Yudkowsky, I think, would argue that we need to stop trying to build AGI immediately. But the worry really is just that we'll get to the level of AGI before we have figured out how exactly to make it safe. So you're exactly right that all of the people, including the doomers, want AGI as soon as possible. Some just think we're so far from knowing how to build safe AGI, we need to completely put the brakes on, maybe for a decade, maybe for several decades, so that the AI safety research can catch up to the AI capabilities research.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this.
So this is a guy who co-founded the Singularity Summit with Peter Thiel and Yudkowsky's institute, which was originally called the Singularity Institute, and then changed its name years later to the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. It got its initial funding from Peter Thiel.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so even more interesting, I think at least, is that DeepMind, which was the first AI company to make AGI the explicit goal of its research.
And AGI is artificial general intelligence. That's
Yes.
a robot that is as intelligent as a person or more intelligent and could actually invent other stuff on its own. Like the difference between this and the glorified search engines we have now is like it's, you know, the AI we have now isn't really capable of like thought and creativity. It's just regurgitating stuff for the most part. And so these guys think that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is going to be the breakthrough where, like, you know, the AI on its own could just invent something that would kill us all or decide to eliminate everybody. Or am I getting that right?
Yes. Yeah. So you could sort of think about the relationship between AI, AGI, and then what's called superintelligence like this. AI is just this broad field.
Okay.
And it includes any kind of artificial information processing system. Your calculator might be a version of AI. In fact, it's superhuman, except only in a very narrow domain. So it's not a general intelligence, it's a narrow intelligence.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then AGI is an AI system that performs at least as well as humans in every cognitive domain of interest.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just know that like I'm learning about some of this AI stuff, and our listeners maybe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really useful to be reminded that some of these ideas and terms are not common knowledge because they just aren't. And so this is the curse of knowledge, as it's called.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so
That's
basically
the whole point of the like informed person. Dumbass with jokes podcast format. It's classic for a reason. Yeah.
And so the last possibility is superintelligence.
Okay.
And so that falls within not just the circle of AI, but also within the circle of AGI. So it's a type of AGI, but it's one that performs much better than any human in every cognitive domain of interest. Scientific discovery, technological innovation, social interaction and manipulation, and so on and so on. And one reason that a lot of people are really excited about these new large language model systems like ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on, is that even though they're not quite AGI, I mean, I would argue they're not close to AGI, but they're more general than other systems.
Okay.
So they can do, you can ask it questions like, help me code for this website, answer this question about physics, write a poem, and so on. And so the fact that it's able to do all of these different tasks, the diversity of tasks suggests to a lot of people that it is a stepping stone towards AGI, because AGI, by definition, it's a general intelligence.
That makes sense.
Right?
And then so Peter Thiel, what's his connection to this?
Yeah, so he's a transhumanist, right?
Okay.
And he is, maybe one could describe him as a singularitarian, somebody who believes in the technological singularity. After all, he co-founded, like I mentioned, the Singularity Summit with Yudkowsky and Ray Kurzweil.
And so singularity is basically when like robots are just as equipped as people, basically. That there's going to be a time where actually like the AI is more advanced than us in these people's view.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit more than that even.
Okay.
Because it specifically pertains to this idea that that the rate of change in the future, post-singularity, will be much, much, much faster than the rate of change today.
Okay.
So you could imagine, like, it's 2025. Now, like 100 years ago, 1925, imagine, like, the sorts of lives that people were living. So their lives were very, very different from our lives today. They didn't have the internet. Thank goodness they didn't have social media, and so on. But the point is, imagine that amount of change happening in like a week or a day.
Imagine all the people being robots instead.
I would love to have seen John Lennon, a red-pilled John Lennon, write that song about the singularity. That would be awesome. So that's really that's the idea of the singularity. It's just this moment when everything changes, a fundamental rupture in the fabric of human history.
And Peter Thiel, so Peter Thiel is a singularitarian. He wants this to happen, and he also wants to accelerate it as fast as possible, correct?
I think his views seem to align most closely with those accelerationists.
Okay,
the people who want to just hit the pedal to the metal, get there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Like, probably on this episode, we're not going to get into it as much as we will on the next episode. But Peter Thiel is also a big fan of these people that are more associated with right wing accelerationism, and like basically, like the best way for us to go forward as a society is to like just allow this technological progress to happen as fast as possible, and it will have very negative consequences, but we need that to achieve the, in this case, libertarian utopia of our dreams.
Yeah.
It's really just like, let's go through hell to get to something that's even a little worse than that,
Yes, so I think it's good to disambiguate different
Yeah.
definitions of accelerationism, right? So there's a lot of overlap between like right-wing accelerationism and AI accelerationism.
Yes,
a lot
and Peter is, he's both, right?
As far as I can tell, I mean, I think part of the excitement about Trump winning the election in 2016 and then more recently is Trump's ability to tear down and destroy the systems that exist. And that's part of right-wing accelerationism. Like, we live in this multicultural society. It doesn't work. Democracy has failed. How then do we actually change our society to become better according to, at least with respect to the criteria and values of the right-wing, far-right worldview? And the accelerations would say, well, we need to accelerate the collapse of society. And in the ashes, in the smoke of the civilization that has been demolished, that's destroyed itself, then we can rebuild an ethno-nationalist state that is racially homogenous and so on. And then that is a society, finally, that will be able to flourish, unlike our current system. So that's right-wing accelerationism. And AI accelerationism is just kind of what you were saying, that it's this view that technology is good. So it's a very technophilic view. So more technology that we have, the better things become. So we should try to increase the rapidity of scientific and technological innovation to get us there as soon as possible. And many of these people believe that the result is going to be something like the singularity, which is a kind of creative destruction, right? It's a point at which we transition to a completely new era. A post-human era, post-singularity world, which is just fundamentally different from ours because the rate of change, there's 100 years of change every second. We're all like, we've merged with machines. Maybe we've all uploaded our minds. We're colonizing space and so on. To put it, to borrow a term from Elon Musk, it's once this singularity happens, then we really have a launch pad for preserving and extending the light of consciousness in the universe.
And Peter Thiel, you were telling me before the show, and I guess he says it himself in that essay that I was reading on the Cato blog, he's into life extension. He's another one of these like live forever type figures, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I talk about that, it's worth going back briefly and just making more clear the connection between Thiel and the actual race to build artificial general intelligence right now.
Okay.
Because there's just one last thing to mention about that, which is that one of the co-founders gave a talk at the Singularity Summit 2010, then followed Peter Thiel back to his mansion, sort of cornered Thiel at some point during the party and asked him for funding for DeepMind, and Thiel said yes. So Thiel also played a really crucial role. Thiel, this individual with deep roots in the TESCREAL movement, played this crucial role in enabling the current race to build artificial general intelligence to take off. And this very much ties into life extension, which you had, I think, had rightly brought up. I'll put that differently. So this very much ties into the idea of life extension, which, as you said, Peter Thiel is very much an advocate of, because many people believe that once we have AGI, then we can offload it or delegate it the task of solving the quote-unquote disease of aging. So, because once we have AGI, we can just copy-paste that program. So as soon as you have one AGI, you have millions of AGIs, right? And these could be like little scientist workers. You give it the task of solving aging, and then, maybe after like a week of research with this army of artificial scientists, they devise some way of overcoming aging. But until we have AGI, there are other possibilities that people like Thiel have been funding. So like he's expressed interest in blood transfusions with young people.
He looks like he might have started already. I'm noticing that, like, with him and Brian Johnson, the other really famous blood guy, they sort of have a similar, like, skin thing going on.
Interesting.
It's kind of tight and shiny. And I'm like, is that what happens when you inject the blood of a younger person? I don't know.
I don't know if there's any evidence that Thiel has actually done this.
Okay.
Brian Johnson has. So he's defended the blood plasma, a bunch of different components of blood, white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, and then the plasma is just the liquid stuff. And so it has lots of nutrients and so on in it. So Brian Johnson has actually had blood transfusions with his son. And
Man. And I thought my mom was a little overbearing, you know? I'm like, in retrospect, all she wants is for me to call her a couple times a week. I'm like, I can do it. She doesn't want my blood.
yeah.
I've really been a bad daughter. You know, it's like, I think I just have to appreciate what I have. Yeah. Does she ask me weird questions about my relationship that are a little too personal? For sure. But she's not injecting my blood, and that's what happens, you know?
My dad has also never asked me for my blood. So I count my blessings. Yeah.
It gives a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
I think when a lot of people think about Peter Thiel and, you know, the ideology of Peter Thiel, two figures that come to mind are Curtis Yarvin and then maybe, you know, for real heads, Nick Land, who is a right accelerationist that writes a lot similarly to Yarvin. They both want to dissolve the state and replace it with like a CEO monarch and, you know, have this like super authoritarian network state kind of situation where like American democracy is gone and it's replaced with a government that is run like a startup, and it's, you know, red pilled. They call it the dark enlightenment. And Peter Thiel is into this stuff. He's been very supportive of Yarvin, has actually given Yarvin startup funding. They hang out and party together in what I can only assume is the single worst fucking party on planet Earth. You know, like, I guess it's good that Peter Thiel is gay because no women are coming to that party.
yeah.
That is a sausage fest. It's just a sausage fest. So, you know, I think like we're going to get more into Yarvin and Land and the specifics of what they believe on the next episode. But for now, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like what's the connection between neo-reactionary dark enlightenment shit, this like weirdo incel post-democracy community, and the TESREAL movement, which I know your research is really focused on.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great question. I actually was just recently asked to write an article specifically on this. I haven't started yet, but...
Well, I'm on the cutting edge. Yes.
Yeah. By the way, you mentioned Curtis Yarvin.
Yeah.
Along with Nick Land, has been instrumental in founding the right word, in sort of, you know, delineating or articulating this dark enlightenment or neo-reactionary, sometimes abbreviated NRX worldview. Yarvin not only has connections with Thiel, who, as you mentioned, has financially supported Yarvin's work, but J.D. Vance. So to tie him in once again, he has specifically referenced Yarvin as being an intellectual influence. And yeah, I mean, Yarvin, the gist of his view is that democracy has failed. Does that sound familiar? We've already gone over that.
Well, actually, so not only does it sound familiar, but Nick Land pulls directly from Yarvin and actually cites that essay that I read about how freedom and democracy are incompatible. So it's somewhat of a symbiotic relationship. They're also regarding Thiel as a thinker in addition to being someone who they want to influence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also maybe worth noting an interesting parallel between Nick Land's view and what we were talking about before, like the technological singularity, whereby we merge with machines, the rate of technological and scientific change happens exponentially fast. According to Land's view, the machinery of capitalism is moving faster and faster over time. And what does capitalism want? It wants to maximize profit. How do we maximize profit? Well, you know, you work more efficiently and so on and so on. So ultimately, there's a question about, well, what happens when human beings become the rate limiting, that is the slowest step in the process, the rate limiting factor when it comes to capital, when it comes to maximizing profit. And so Land's view is that ultimately, of course, then we are going to start to get replaced by machines. So he argues that the internal logic of capitalism leads to a world in which artificial beings are the ones who rule. They take over, right? Because artificial beings, presumably, would be able to work in a much more productive and efficient way than squishy biological humans. So there's also this interesting connection there.
Yeah, it's kind of like I know you haven't seen that show Severance yet, but it reminds me a lot for the Severance heads out there. It's like these guys are trying to do IRL Severance in some way. It's so creepy. I mean, like, to me, when you were talking about how human beings were being limited by the fact that we are going too slow. We're just built to go too slow. I did do a little bit of internal biographical analysis on Nick Land, and I remembered that this dude used to be associated with more leftist figures until he got addicted to literal meth. And I'm like, maybe that's why I feel so fast, Nick. Try a little chamomile tea instead.
I think he had a mental breakdown for years. Didn't he after that?
If you're just reading all this shit, who knows? Who knows which came first? And I'm not trying to make fun of drug addiction, but it does feel like one of those things, like sort of with like John Fetterman's mind, where, he was like seeming more semi-normal, and then he had this like huge mental shift as a result of his stroke, and then just got much worse opinions. Seems like, just from a sort of surface level analysis, that might have also happened to Nick Land.
Yeah.
And whereas you can just look at Curtis Yarvin and tell that Curtis Yarvin has just been like the most fucking annoying neck beard that you've ever seen for your entire life. We'll put a picture on the YouTube edition, but if you are listening to us in podcast form, please just take a moment to Google search and you'll be like, that's right, that guy looks super fucking annoying. It's just like this weird sort of combination of incel ideology and like racist, what they would call like race science, pro-eugenics. There's a very big obsession with IQ and a lot of these traditional alt-right type ideas. Curtis Yarvin will say that he isn't alt-right because he's like, well, I'm actually a monarchist. Like, I'm not into Hitler, I'm into Queen Elizabeth. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're a fascist.
You're absolutely right. A lot of them are obsessed with IQ.
Yeah.
I've mentioned, Eliezer Yudkowsky before. He has repeatedly referred to himself in his own autobiographies as a genius over and over again. He boasts that he has an IQ of, I think it's 143, which, I don't know, that's not super high.
That's not that high, right? Like, aren't there, like, isn't that just kind of like normal, sort of normal level genius, even in these people's weird?
I mean, the joke I have had in my head for years, I've never mentioned this publicly with maybe one exception in the past.
Well, then put it on a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think IQ is absolute bullshit.
I do too,
I think it's
course.
complete pseudoscience. But his IQ is lower than mine when I took the test back when I was in high school. So according to their logic, there should be more deference towards me than towards this, supposedly super genius guy.
In their logic, they would call that getting cucked. They've been IQ cucked
right.
by the host of Dystopia Now. Yeah.
But IQ is this hierarchy. It's this linear scale that linear scale on which you can place every single human being. And the sort of underlying interpretation of the scale is that it not just measures IQ, is a ranking of superiority. Right. And so this is one of the problems with IQ. So yeah, a lot of these people are obsessed with IQ. They're IQ realists. So they believe that IQ is a real thing. And a lot of them have sympathies towards what is called human biodiversity, which sounds benign. It sounds
like a vaginal douche commercial, if I'm being honest. From my perspective, it sounds like the flora and the fauna, but I'm pretty sure that these people don't mean anything that has to do with the vagina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically just race science.
Yeah. No, it is. It doesn't Yarvin explicitly say that he believes that white people have higher IQs than black people?
So he has supposedly, in a satirical way, said that black people are genetically inclined to be slaves. This
is Thiel's like favorite philosopher.
Yeah. And so let me add something as well. Speaking of race realists, when I hear that term or I think of it, I immediately think of this blog post that was published years ago by Kaplan, an economist named Brian Kaplan. And So Brian Kaplan, he's based at a university in Washington, D.C., but he himself is an IQ realist. But he published this blog post that was titled IQ with Conscience. And he says the following. I'll
Yeah,
read
do it.
two short paragraphs because they're quite shocking. And as I mentioned, I mean, his report here has been in my head for years now. He writes the
Okay.
following. I've got to admit, my fellow IQ realists are on average a scary bunch. People who vocally defend the power of IQ are vastly more likely than normal people to advocate extreme human rights violations. I've heard IQ realists advocate a one-child policy for people with low IQs. I've heard IQ realists advocate a no-child policy for people with low IQs. I've heard IQ realists advocate forced sterilization for people with low IQs. I've heard IQ realists advocate forcible exile of people with low IQs, fellow citizens, not just immigrants. Not just immigrants. So it's even worse.
In this house, we believe that we should forcibly sterilize everyone with a low IQ. Yeah.
So he continues, I've heard IQ realists advocate murdering people with low IQs. When I say, quote, I've heard, I'm not just talking about stuff I've read on the internet. I'm talking about what IQ realists have told me to my face. In my experience, if a stranger brings up low IQ in Africa, there's about a 50-50 chance he casually transitions to forced sterilization or mass murder of hundreds of millions of human beings as an intriguing response. You can protest that they're just trolling, but these folks seemed frighteningly sincere to me. So realists, like, that should be a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Anybody who hears that.
And Peter Thiel is an IQ realist.
As far as I know, he is. I mean, I know that he has said before that there are there's some people use nicotine gum as a nootropic. Right, that's the term, nootropic. It's supposed to be a brain enhancer.
Okay.
And so my understanding is that Peter Thiel chews nicotine gum on a regular basis, and he has claimed, and I'm more or less quoting here, that he believes nicotine gum can increase your IQ by 10 points. So
Well,
yes,
that is why I'm so fucking smart. It's because I'm addicted to vaping. Yeah.
so what a funny legacy of me having been in this community years ago. And I was never an IQ realist, right? My relationship to the test grill movement was sort of complex. It's almost motivated by social justice concerns, although I think I was profoundly misguided in my thinking that the best way to support social justice was to focus on future generations, because after all, they're the most disenfranchised
Yeah.
demographic out there because they have no voice. But anyway, so I was in the community for the longest time, and I still chew nicotine gum because that's what so many people did.
I mean, I could definitely see how people come to this type of, not IQ realism, but to, effective altruism or even long-termism from an allegedly liberal perspective without, I think, once people learn more about it and the sort of dark ideas that are at the heart of this stuff, or what happens when you take these ideas, you play the tape all the way to the end. But I know some really decent people who are into like the EA type stuff. And, it's hard for me to explain, in a quick way, like, look, buddy, I know that you're into this because you think that it's about mosquito nets and it's actually about eugenics. And that's something that a lot of people get to once they learn more about it, as you did. But they have taken great pains to make a lot of these ideas, transhumanism, AI, seem like their goal is the benefit of humanity. Whereas Peter Thiel definitely seems like he's on the kind of openly right-wing side of it. He's not, he's not fucking around with I'm trying to think of Reid Hoffman or even a Sam Altman type that's this is going to change our society and it might be hard, but it's all going to be so nice afterwards and we're going to relax. Peter Thiel is no, but we're creating libertarian utopias and we're not going to make the same mistake twice about giving the bitches the right to vote,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that humanism and effective altruism, this idea that we should use technology to re-engineer ourselves so that we overcome the sorts of limitations that a lot of transhumanists would argue are the root causes of misery in the world. Aging, death, we've referenced those before as examples, but in also effective altruism, this idea that we want to figure out the most effective ways using science and reason to positively impact the world. A lot of this does have a natural appeal to people with empathy and compassion and, from a distance. But I think you're totally right that transhumanism is a version of eugenics, which is not something that I really understood until probably 5 years into my association with this community, until you realize, like, actually a lot of the people in the transhumanist movement, they still do channel discriminatory attitudes, racism, sexism, ableism, xenophobia, and so on. And same with effective altruism. You sort of look at the details, then you kind of get a different impression of what these ideologies are after, play the tape to the end kind of situation. And then also being in the community, you get a better sense of, like, actually a lot of the people in the community are kind of problematic in various ways.
Yeah.
I wrote a whole article on this for Salon back in 2022 about the toxic community. Nick Bostrom, he, now it's known that he held, like, pretty racist views back in at least the 1990s, where he would, in an email, he explicitly said, I'm quoting, "I believe blacks are more stupid than whites." And then he went on to use the N-word.
Okay, like, first of all, I just want to condemn the racism off the bat.
Yes.
Obviously, you have to be a piece of shit to say something like that.
It's
but
horrific.
I'm also thinking about the arrogance that
Yeah.
it takes to write something down like with that. Like, that these people just, they feel that they're not susceptible to, like, the same social consequences or rules as other people who live in a fucking society. To me, that's, like, a lot of what, is kind of comes back to with, like, Yarvin and Thiel and some of these people that are associated with them. They're saying things out loud that are repulsive, and it's just all about this, like, trolling sort of, are we joking, are we not, that I think got a lot of attention around 2017 when Trump got elected, 2016 when people were like, oh shit, what's the alt-right? Like, these figures, Thiel and the extended Thielverse, they're somewhat pioneers of that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's definitely a connection between the Dark Enlightenment and the alt-right. And, actually sort of going back to the links between the Dark Enlightenment and the test-rule movement, all the transhumanists and long-termists and so on. Curtis Yarvin, he's sort of, I want to say that he gained visibility as a result of interacting with an economist, actually a colleague of Brian Kaplan's at university in Washington, D.C.
Be one of the people that Brian Kaplan was also talking shit about, if we're to speculate.
Yes,
Yeah.
quite possibly. So, Robin Hanson, Slate has called him the creepiest economist in America, or at least suggested that he might be, after Robin Hanson wrote an article about sex redistribution, arguing that, well, progressives and liberals, they talk about redistributing wealth. Yeah, but there are, like, incels out there who need something and they're not getting it. So if you really, like, if you want to be consistent as a progressive or a liberal, you should be open to not just wealth redistribution, but sex redistribution. And he wrote this in the aftermath of a terrorist attack perpetrated by an incel that killed multiple people. And so he was like, well, maybe, just thinking here, just brainstorming, maybe.
I think I remember when he said that. I think I remember that being like that. He was the main character of Twitter that day.
Yeah, he even suggested that this might be a good cause area for effective altruism. There were some people in the EA community, I remember, who were not happy about that.
And what is Yarvin's connection to this?
And so Yarvin ended up doing a debate with Robin Hanson, and they had an exchange that was covered on Robin Hanson's blog called Overcoming Bias, lols. But Overcoming Bias, so that was, Overcoming Bias is also cited as one of the most important, at least formatively important, blogs within the test grill movement. There are lots and lots of people who look to Robin Hanson as this kind of, he's sometimes described as a weird genius, somebody who's a pioneer in thinking about the longer term future of humanity, and thinking about rationality, in thinking about futures markets where you sort of bet on what might happen in the future. So Robin Hanson's been a key figure in the test grill movement, and Yarvin was sort of propelled to popularity to some extent as a result of his interactions with Robin Hanson. So that's yet another connection.
How come I never get invited to the weird loser party? How come I'm not invited to the incel on incel debate?
Oh man, it's such a sad state of affairs.
So, okay, I think this is a good place to leave it this week. Next week, we will get more into the Dark Enlightenment and the NeoReactionary movement. And we'll do Peter Thiel Part 2. This has been fun and also really horrifying. I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon subscribers because they are the people that bring you this show. We have Molly, we have Casey Lau, Richard Horseman, we have Jacob Kakula, Phil Giles in League, Simon, Megan Brokenborg, Christopher Graybill, Deidre O, Mark Gordon, Juan Martinez, Dan Smith, Naomi Winter Vincent, Adam, Michelle, Jason Morgado, What Eves, Carrie Lawrence, and Derek Lipkin. And, thank you so much. I hope if you enjoy the show and you're not a Patreon subscriber, that you would consider becoming a Patreon subscriber so that we can get on our way to hiring an editor, because that would be so awesome. And also, we have a bonus episode out on Patreon already about Bezos versus Musk in terms of what they believe about space. And we'll be doing another bonus episode very soon. I haven't told Emil this, but about the Silicon Valley murder cult that I have been researching.
The Zizians.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
I've been spending too much time looking into these people, and this seems like a great topic for our Patreon. So please subscribe, and thank you so much. And we just really appreciate you. We'll be back next week with more stuff that you probably don't know about if you're not an incel.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Dystopia Now is a co-production of Emil Torres and Kate Willett. Our theme song is Hunger Strike by Emil Torres. We have no outside funding or advertising, so if you can become a contributor on Patreon, we deeply appreciate your help keeping the show going. We are a brand new podcast, so please rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice, and we'd love your help getting the word out. Thank you so much.